are you online now? Corey? Do you hear me? Bob?
I
Yes,
can hear you,
Corey.
Bill. I'm here. Corey is present. Thank you. Checking in.
Checking in. Okay, well, let's get this meeting going. Call the meeting to order and let's do introductions. Kevin, you want to start?
Kevin Stevenson, Mobility Parking Manager.
Bill Kerner, member.
Joy Porter, member.
Carl,
Carl Stang, member.
Luke,
Luke Brentz, member.
Corey,
Corey Satella, member, and I just got home and I'm getting settled. So that's why I got my camera off.
okay. And Bob, do you
Present.
hear me?
Member. Yep.
Great. Thanks for joining us, Bob.
Well,
Basketball season must be over.
I apologize for the last one. Sorry about that, guys.
No problem. No problem. Okay. Do we have any guests? I haven't seen anyone sign on. Okay. Okay. The next item of agenda is approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any comments they want to make about the agenda?
I don't.
Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda as provided.
Bill, I move that we approve the agenda as presented in the packet.
Is there a second?
it. I'll second it.
Joy seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That is approved. Bob, did I hear you? Bob?
No, I didn't say anything.
Oh, will you
Yes.
sign on to the motion? Yes.
Yes, I approved them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, that passes unanimously. Next item of business is approval of the minutes of June 22nd. That was a regular meeting. Again, does anybody have any comments on the agenda?
I mean,
Not
on the
the
minutes,
agenda, but the approval of the minutes, rather.
yeah,
Go ahead.
well, I do on the minutes under 7, the report. It's just a word choice. It should either read permit sales or sales of permits. It's just a word choice.
Do you have a preference?
Well, to keep with it, I would probably say, gosh, could go either way. The sales of permits, I think that's what was being said. So we could just change that or have it changed and approve it. Sales of, yeah,
Sorry.
or you could just do permit sales, just do one word.
Joy, can you
Kevin, you have a
clarify
choice.
where that is?
I would just go with sales and permit sales.
Looks like that's the first paragraph there where it says instead of cells, you're proposing to put sales. Is that right, Joy?
Yeah, sales or the reverse, Corey, of sales of permits. It just wasn't complete. It's
That's your
not a
motion,
great
Joy?
thing. Most people wouldn't notice, but I notice those things.
That's your motion?
Yes, my motion is to accept the minutes with the change that we mentioned.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair, I would second that motion.
Okay, thank you. Moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
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 It's approved unanimously.
Looks
Thank
like we
you.
lost Bob.
Okay. Next item is public comment on non-agenda items. I guess we don't have any public here today, so what do we do to promote us a little better so the public can get on and make comments? We've had one or two over the last 6 months, but it strikes
Well,
me that Kevin, go ahead.
I will see what our public information officer can do to promote the meeting dates and link a little better. I'll look into that tomorrow when I get back to the office.
Okay, that'd be great. Okay.
Hey, Mr. Chair,
Presentation.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, yes.
Since you asked,
sorry.
since you asked, an idea that came to me is if people knew a bit more about what we were doing, like if we could talk a little bit maybe about our 2 subcommittees or task force that we're doing, and let people know that we're working on issues that we think are important. And we welcome citizen input on mobility and parking items, and that this is the right and constructive way to do it. And if we did it a month or so in advance of a meeting, and there's lots of websites, I would say be careful what you wish for, because, we want to be very inclusive of all voices, but if you cast a wide net, you might get a lot of input, and we have to be ready to deal with that.
Point. I think if we're succinct about what we're doing, and it would be beneficial, I think, to the group, so that the public does understand what the heck we are, and what do we do, and why are we doing it. So I would suggest that on the 2 items on the agenda today, that one of the parties from each group write something up. Carl, go ahead.
So maybe digging in this a little too deep, but I mean, if we expect members of the public to spend their time to come and provide public comment, the way we're going to get people motivated to do that is for them to feel like they're listened to, and that actually will make a difference. And so I don't know if people view this board as potentially as a decision maker, it would probably just go straight to council or straight to staff. Maybe that's
Good
part of
point.
our issue.
And I also think, to follow up what Carl said, is that, the 2 task forces are just right now sort of forming and trying to figure out some things. And we don't want people to come on and start telling us things when we're not working on that. We're not working on rewriting code. We're working on the ease of use of the Rpp guidelines. We're not getting rid of it or trying to change it in that way. It's ease of use. So we have to be careful that when we want the public input, that they're giving us input on something that we have worked on, and see how it meets the public needs too.
That's a really good point, Joy. And I think we do need to really dig into both these issues and come up with some potential solutions that we can take public. Not that it's not public already if people read the minutes, but I think that's a good idea. Kevin, thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. I'll get with, like I said, our PIO and see what we can do to try to get the word out a little sooner than we are on what's coming up and what we're doing and what we're looking for. I do know Roy had somebody on Deer Path reach out to him, and they were provided the information. They wanted to come and kind of let the board know what's going on in their little neighborhood. So I'm surprised they're not here, but that was basically kind of an RPP question. We're looking on how to get the process going and maybe vent some parking grievances are having up that way.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm really sorry.
Loud and clear.
I got a new computer and I can't make the doggone audio work on a Zoom call, so now I'm back on my phone. So I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Were you saying, apologies, but were you talking about trying to encourage more involvement from residents and using
Yeah.
us better? Is that what you were talking about?
Yeah, that's sort of where I was going. And, people need to understand what we do, number one. And then if they want to get involved, hey, come and join us and share your wisdom or your gripe, whatever the case may be. And we've had a couple of people come in and gripe about this and that. And yes, we are just an advisory group. All we can do is recommend, and certainly council will make the final decision. But I think it would help the community better understand what we're about, the issues that we're tackling, and so forth and so on. So that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Bill. I have to say, I think I was very disappointed in some people's comments and questioning of Roy and Kevin on policy, particularly going back to that city council meeting that you guys did such a fantastic job at. I couldn't be there, but I watched it. You know, I was really shocked about some of the questions that if anybody had taken the time to engage with us, they wouldn't have asked those questions, and they would have been better. They would have been better informed. And I won't name names, but these are people that work for the, you know, have a critical role in the city. And again, I was just astounded as people would throw out ideas, and Roy and the rest of you would calmly diffuse those ideas with real sound data and answers. And you know what I mean? I mean, I almost was offended a little bit, like, wow, you know, these people don't realize that we've been kicking around these ideas as volunteers for months and years. So just a comment, but I didn't get a chance to make that comment because I wasn't at the last meeting. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, thanks for your comments, Bob. I really agree with you on that. Yeah,
My 2 cents on things is, if we're seeking more public engagement, we have to be very direct. Because as I think it was Corey who said, if we're going to ask for just general, hey, what are your ideas? You know, that's not going to get to where we want to be.
No,
I
it's
remember, I don't remember when it was, but it was the annual city survey, right? And we put out a lot of, the city, you know, city council, put out a lot of effort into making sure we got a lot of input onto that survey. And when I opened that survey, it was like fairly little questions, and they were very broad. Like, do you like living here? Do you enjoy downtown? And, you know, it was just so indirect. I mean, I think that if we were to ask specifically residents things that we want answers to, that we need to be direct with our questions. Like, hey, are you interested in a bike lane on X street at this time, or whatever it may look like, but be very direct with our communication with all of the stakeholders. And it doesn't have to be just residents, because again, we're serving residents and business owners and guests of the city, tourists. And so whenever we think through, you know, what are our questions with everybody, we just want to be very direct, and that way we get answers. Part of market research is not conducting a survey and getting answers we don't want. We want answers that can be utilized as data, and that we can transform that into a usable, you know, what is that for? And if we're going to spend time asking questions, my suggestion is to make those questions very thoughtful.
Well, and Luke, I agree that they need to be thoughtful and direct, but I think also when you are making a survey, there's a lot of things that go into it. It's not, you know, you can't say, are you interested? Because you're not going to get the data that you need to help you make decisions. And surveys, really, the questions need to be vetted. So you're getting information and you don't go off into the weeds. It's you know, the one that the city put out, you know, was vetted through the PIO, and it was, the questions were from other surveys, so they knew that they had reliability. So it's always very challenging to make a survey so you get the information you want, not the answers, but the information. But I agree, you need to figure that out. But again, if you're going to have someone do the survey, there's a lot of costs involved if you want to have it vetted. It's I have done surveys before, and when I was a principal in a school district, and surprising when you ask a question and what you get is not the information you can use. Right. So I'm sure you find that sometimes too.
I wonder if we should be trying to take a more proactive approach. You know, I officially am old because I can't wait until the Pikes Peak Bulletin arrives on Friday. I love that paper, and every time I read it, I go, man, you're an old guy. Who? There's not that much stuff in here. But I love it. But I mean, could we ever get the bulletin? Parking, as we all know, is so critical an issue for us as residents. I mean, and I don't know who the heck would write this, but it would be really helpful if we had an article every issue, you know, like maybe there's one on the rear end, back end parking. You know, my son says, why, that's really weird. And, you know, he's a kid, but, you know, there's a lot of adults that think it's weird and don't understand that we picked up 23 spaces by doing that, and the safety components and all of that. I mean, could we ever get to where this, I'm sure the city doesn't have time to do this, and I know we don't, but you know what I mean? Where we have that proactive role and we get people, we educate them. I mean, people just aren't educated about the true challenges. They just complain. And I'm talking about people that have lived here for decades, and they don't, you know what I mean? They just don't see down the road like we do. And it would be really cool if we could be proactive, or maybe it's on the social media. But anyway, that's probably a dream because I don't know who would do it.
Well, we can put that in place by asking some pointed questions of the bulletin. Hey, we'd really like to hear from the public a little bit. We'd like to explain, first of all, what we're doing. For instance, let's start with back-end parking. And yeah, okay, it's weird. And some people go in frontwards anyway, but that's another
Not too
story.
many.
Not too many. I've been
No.
surprised. I've been pleasantly
count them.
surprised about that. Do you really? But
Yeah, I count
think
when I'm doing my surveys of the town, I count how many. There was
Well-
2 the other day and I was impressed.
I mean,
is
might
a
we
pretty-
get more response? Maybe it's just a question. Ask the parking board a question. Would we get more response from that than a survey maybe? And it only takes one person to send in a good question. Maybe nobody would do it. I don't know. But if there was a generic email, and this became a regular feature where somebody could simply type in what, explain this or whatever, then it's just answering a question. And I think we could come up with a way to do that. But
It sounds
Well,
like a good
why don't we
idea.
do this? Kevin and I can approach the bulletin and pose the issue, if you will, and ask for their guidance in terms of, okay, do you have space? Is this something that is newsworthy enough to inform the people? But I think there's a lot of people that do read the bulletin. I certainly, I'm with you, Bob. I can't wait to get it every week.
It's online too on Thursday, Bob. You
It
can get
is.
I like
Yeah.
paper, Joy. I like paper.
You like
Huge,
paper?
huge.
All of us who
Well-
like the bulletin are dating ourselves, by the way.
Yeah.
One of the things, Bill, that they bulletin usually will ask for, they will say if you want to do a guest editorial page, you see those in there, they're a page long,
Mhm.
but then someone has to write it. So it's like belling the cat.
Well, that can be an issue that any one of us could write and vet it with a group and put it in. Why not?
Well, and
They
I have
may
a
say
thought,
that.
Bill. We have our 3
sorry,
alternate
who?
positions that are still open. What if we start with maybe posting that in the bulletin? That'll draw some people to at least check the meetings out. And maybe we can get our alternates and draw more people to come see what's going on in the meetings.
It's a good idea, Kevin. Yeah, why not?
It's important to make that a priority too.
Yep.
So, sorry, don't,
Carl, go ahead.
I think I see pretty regularly in the bulletin in the back, I'm trying to think of the section, they post all the open board positions.
They do.
They do.
Yeah.
Yes, they do, Carl.
So I've seen the map, hey, we need alternates for several months.
Oh, years,
Okay, much longer.
literally years.
Yeah.
But I do think I'm with you guys. I always look at that and I'm kind of puzzled though that nobody wants to even be an alternate. I mean, apparently there are alternates from some of the other boards. I mean, I would think, again, our issue is so huge. I'm always very surprised that we never get an alternate that has an interest.
Yeah. Well, and Natalie, you've joined us. Are you here? Do you have some thoughts on this particular idea from a city council perspective?
Well, I'm super biased. I love the bulletin as well. And I think the more ways that we can reach out, the better. I think the more we can explain what the thinking behind what we're doing, the better. As far as alternates go, I mean, you're right. It's shocking we actually don't get more people that, because that's all I hear about all day, right? I mean, parking is the thing. So I'm intrigued too as to why there isn't an alternate, but I like where you're going. I think this is a great conversation. And jumping on, I just heard the end of the survey conversation, and surveys are hard. And I think you guys recognize that and mentioned that, like, a good survey, you got to pay, or else you get these weird answers that are not helpful or the wrong answer, but I'm also a fan of surveys, but you got to, my experience is you have to pay. But I think the bulletin is the low hanging fruit.
Okay. Well, why don't we bring some ideas and specific issues to our next meeting, or even sooner? Just send it to Kevin and me, and we can bring it back to the board and say, hey, we've looked at this, and hey, what do you say we do this? And in the meantime, we can talk to the bulletin and see if they're going to be receptive to it as well. So I think we can tackle this on several fronts, and because I think we need more exposure and more information needs to get out, because a lot of people, everybody gripes about parking and congestion and you name it, anything to do with travel through town. It's just an ongoing issue. We all live with it, and we need to explain what we're doing about it, quite frankly.
Yeah, and you
So-
know what, Bill? That's a great comment, and I have to add on that. My son works at Uncle Sam's, and he says he's a waiter, and he goes, Dad, you wouldn't believe how many people talk about parking, you know, particularly people from out of state, which this time of the year, most of them are in Sam's are. So it's even about educating our business owners. Like, how much help would it be if the staff at Uncle Sam's knew the particulars, kind of how the basics? They're not going to drill down, but you know, oh yeah, there's sidewalk. Maybe I'm dreaming here, but if I were a business owner, I would actually embrace that, because it just makes you look more professional. So, you know, there's another component there that we need to think about. To me, it's our city leadership, because I'm not sure everybody knows everything. It's obviously our residents and our visitors, but let's think about business owners as well, because they could help us.
Absolutely. Yep. Okay. Well, I think we've got this one talked about. And so let's move on, unless somebody else has something they want to say that's important at this point. Okay, let's move on. Next item of business is Rpp Guidelines and Procedures and Staff List. Kevin.
Yes, so in the packet, there's just a quick little Word document of a couple things that were brought to my department's attention and myself regarding our tasks with the RPP guidelines and procedures that we're looking at. And then below that was some El Paso Boulevard mobility boulevard ideas that staff had. So we'll start with the RPP guidelines.
So Kevin, just so we're all on the same page, it's page 8 of 12
Yes.
in the packet.
That's right,
So-
Corey.
So-
Okay.
Some of the
thanks.
things that were brought to staff's attention are looking at the guest permits specifically. We notice that they are kind of being used and abused as a regular resident permit. And unfortunately, the guidelines don't really have anything that are allowing us to really enforce that, because technically it's a legally parked vehicle with a valid permit. They do have to follow that 72-hour code, where the vehicle does have to be moved every 3 days. But we're finding a lot of abuse with that. That has been brought up a lot on Waltham. So that's kind of where that originated from. And then what we're looking for on that is what the board feels about, should there be a limit on the time that the guest permit can be used without some prior notification to my department? If we've got extended family that's going to be doing an extended stay, obviously we don't want to rush them off, but we would like to know, so if we're getting calls, we're not really wasting the resources to go up there on something that is legitimate. Under the rewrite for ease of use and understanding, that's probably a really bad term. We're not looking to rewrite the guidelines and procedures. We're looking to clean them up and simplify them. And that's also at a staff level. There's been times where even Roy and I have come up with a situation and we're kind of scratching our heads on the wording of this. And I can only imagine a resident who understands there's a parking problem, but really doesn't understand what the code is saying, not understanding that as well. And then the other big thing on that is I did see in there the timeline restrictions for filing an application. I feel at the staff level, because we see this a lot of our parking issues are seasonal. A lot of our parking issues are opposite of our busy season. So I really feel at the staff level, there shouldn't be a time frame to get those in. As the problem arises, the application should be available for pickup and for staff to start investigating and studying that area.
Okay, the question then is, Joy and Corey, have you been able to meet and talk about these items at all? Or
Well,
do you have-
what, we haven't met because we have
go ahead,
time
Joy.
still to meet. But one of the things that I'd want to bring up, and that's what Kevin brought up, is on making it simple and clarifying. There's a lot of places, it's not written poorly, it's not written well. And there's a lot of places in there, from the structure of the sentences to the word choices and clarity, just word agreement with the verb. So there's a lot of cleanup like that that has to happen first. And then you can start really looking. I think Kevin had brought up last week about, it seems like someone should be able to make an application whenever, if that's what staff wants. And it seems that that is an easy thing. So, I have a couple questions when I'm starting to look into the grammar of this and the ease of reading and clarity. And I can ask that, and I just have two things I need help with, Kevin. But one of the things I would say about the guests is that it's going to be very hard for all the people who do it legitimately. When they have a guest that comes over just out of the blue and comes over to the house, and then to say they have to inform someone, I'm not sure how it would work and be very good for the people that are doing it right. I think you really need to look at the abuses, see what they are, and is it really widespread, or is it on Waltham, it's 6 people doing it, and deal with that rather than all the people that are doing it right. Just to say, now you're going to be restricted. When you want to have a guest over, you have to inform someone, or you have to do it between these hours. It just further restricts something that is working for a lot of people.
Well, and I
Waltham has
agree.
always been a situation. It's always been, look how many, it took us 2 years to get it figured out when we were working on that, Kevin, as you know. So I would say that, what we've been looking at least I've been looking at, is really clarifying the language. The 2 questions that I have, Kevin, just to do is that wherever there's the word agent, I'm assuming it would either be Roy's title or your title. And I need to know which to put in. And then the other one on the map, MAP, it's the map board. So every time you say map, you need to put the board in there, because it's not MAPB, it's just MAP. So I was going to just have that clarification too. But I think we have to be careful on the guest things, because I know sometimes I've gone to someone's house and they say, oh, I'll just walk out and give you the guest pass. And they do, and it's perfect. If I had to sign up, I think Manitou people would, especially ones who follow it. So,
right, no, and if I could address that real quick. So Waltham is where this idea had started, but it does happen in other RPPs where we're getting people that may necessarily not be a resident of the address, but they're using a guest pass long term. There's an address, not to get too into detail, on Ruxton where a permit was,
where it is.
somebody was issued a guest permit, and that vehicle's been there almost the entire year. I mean, we're a few days from August, and that's the kind of abuse that we're looking at, where, you know, if what I'm hearing, especially off of the louder voices on Waltham, which I agree with, is, you know, these should be like a 72-hour per vehicle use at a time, instead of these people that are kind of jumping in there and because they don't meet the criteria for a decal, found that loophole with a guest permit. And there's really nothing in the code currently that's allowing us to enforce on that.
I
Okay.
can see that if it's 72 hours and maybe it would work, but not just
Yeah.
spontaneous ones.
Hey, Mr. Chair, can
Sorry. Yes,
can I speak on
yes,
this? I've had my
jump
hand
in.
up for a little while.
yes, you have. You're on.
Yeah, I'd rather not just jump in, so I'm trying to use the raise hand function when I'd like to speak. So if that's okay, I'll go ahead now. And so, yeah, I love the discussion about the guest pass and the 72-hour, and I think that's a fantastic part of the discussion that we should have. What I really want to know, and I'm not sure how to take the lead. I haven't like met directly with Joy, but we've emailed, and I've created this Drive document where I've written some of the concerns, and I believe we want to understand all the concerns and agree on the scope of change that we'd like to make on the RPP documents. And I think it's going to take this level of detail that we're talking now. It's going to take that looking at the document overall as a whole. I'll confess that I looked at I really started to study the document about a week ago. And, I believe if the MAP is to add value to this process, what we really want to do is become familiar, or at least, not, if it's not everyone on the committee, then at least we as a task force can draw out the important summaries and things and make it easy for people on this board to weigh in on the things that we think are important about the RPP. The things Joy is saying, 100% agree. We need to swap out some words and fix some grammar and things like that. But I truly believe that we need to look at section 3 of the RPP document, the purpose and intent. And we want to think about what we want, what we think the RPP should be doing. And I think we should look for every opportunity we can to streamline this process. Most of this document is, a lot of this document is tied up in this very bureaucratic process where people can apply for, and there's this big, and it's cadenced, which it shouldn't be. So I agree with those comments, but there's a long process before it can be awarded an RPP. I think as part of deciding the scope of what we're doing, I really want to understand why this wouldn't be just a simple administrative decision based on clearly defined values for what we think is important for the community. Why do we need public hearings and a bunch of process around RPPs? Are things still the way they were? And as a member of this task force, I really want to get the feedback from staff and the rest of the committee, and from Natalie too, as a council rep. Thank you.
Kevin,
So the RPP is well before my time. Council, because we are changing kind of the way the neighborhood parking works, council would ultimately have that final decision if we're going to make it more restrictive and the enforcement and all of that. Sorry, Roy just sent me a text. Let me reply real quick.
Let me jump in on that and say, whatever council wants, it's our job to try to make recommendations around it. So,
correct.
And it's actually, Kevin, it's what council want and what you want. Like, we want to understand the scope of what you envision for this and what council envisions, so we know the right scope of how we want to approach this and the right level of engagement and community questions that we're going to ask around this.
Well, we're definitely not trying to remove anything from council. We do want council to be in the know of everything, so that process would stay. We're just looking for, and I'm going to use something that Roy had set up for the departments he oversees. We get together weekly, and we review the city council agendas for all the items. And if I have an item on there, this is my world. This is what I do. I understand the terminology. I understand the acronyms. And when we get going in our world, that's the way we start talking, and we assume everybody understands that. So I present what we're going over with the other departments Roy oversees, and that will allow me to ensure everybody understands what I'm talking about. And that's what we're looking for with the RPP guidelines, is somebody who works in it every day, 50 plus hours a week, somebody who lives in a current RPP, or somebody who's interested in it, should be able to pick the guidelines and procedures up and understand what's going on and how it works.
And right now, Kevin, it's cumbersome.
Yeah,
Very much.
And
I think
needs clarity. It's more than grammar. That's important, because when you have clarity, you have to have readability, and you don't have readability if you don't have things in order. I think that's true. I've been involved in RPP since, gosh, I think, Bill, since we started doing it and started getting the neighborhoods into it.
Right.
So there's, you know, a lot of work that went in as you're trying to get a neighborhood, or a neighborhood wants something. You just can't ignore the people that don't want it. So, you know, there needs to be a process of some kind, but maybe not as cumbersome as it is when you read it now. I like to read code, so I think it's interesting.
No, I think we do need the code, and I think, Corey, you asked the question, why can't this be administrative? And ultimately, it comes back to the code, like it or not. And I think we just have to simplify the code and revise it so it's readable, it's understandable, it's easy to enforce, and reach that point. And I think we can do it. I
So Bill,
continue to marvel. Go ahead.
Can I interrupt for a question? So the
Sure.
document I'm looking at is the one I found on the city's website. It's a Word doc, Microsoft Word RPP Final 8-1-11. But are you talking about the actual code that backs up this policy? This is a policy document, not the code. Is that what you're saying, that we need to
Well,
take a
I
step
think
back
you
and look at the
develop
actual code?
you develop the actual policy, how you want to change things the way they are. And Kevin's given us some good starting points. I think ultimately we need to pass it on to city council, because it does need to be embedded in code, or else there's no enforcement capability.
Well, of course, and our only capacity is to advise city council, and they want us
That's
to be
all we can
experts.
do.
They want us to be
Right.
experts on things like this and provide our expert advice on how we should revise. And I think it's
Right.
this document, and then I think in Appendix A is actually, the one on the website says copy of ordinance number 0813, but then all it says is will be replaced by a new Manitou Springs ordinance. So there is a legal document that's in addition to the policy manual.
Hmm.
And we probably need to look at both. Is that what you're saying, Bill?
Yeah. Ultimately, we have to get agreement on what the policy document contains. And once we've got that general agreement, anybody could write code based on a good policy document. I'm not saying we have to do that. That's really a city council decision. And they may task staff to come back and write the policy into code. And but let's not cross that bridge now. Let's try to solve the problem, the basic problems that we have with how RPPs are handled, and make the policy choices, at least a recommendation to city council. Now, they may turn around and say, okay, we like what you did, or we don't like what you did. and now let's see if we can't get some code in. And does that sound like a logical approach to you all?
I mean,
Well,
Bill,
no,
I'm really directly asking a question about the administration. Like, what is the right level of administration? So let me ask it this way. How many times in the history of this RPP document has this process been denied? Has it ever happened, or has it happened regularly? I truly don't know the
yes,
answer.
yeah, it
Carolyn?
has.
Go
It has
ahead,
been.
Joy. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I don't know the specific times, but I do know that when you get a group of neighbors together initially and they decide they want it, and then they decide they don't want it, and then it's denied because there's not enough people that are doing it, or don't understand the restrictions that puts on your street. I mean, there's a lot of discussion among neighborhoods. There's some neighborhoods that don't need RPPs because they have plenty of off-street parking. There's other ones that don't have enough off-street, even if they have an RPP, like on Waltham. So it's more than just how many didn't do it. It's like, how do you get neighborhoods to work together to the benefit of the residents?
Well, I look
Keep
at this
going back
document,
to the.
most of
ahead,
it should
Cory.
be, I think most of it should be administratively decided by staff. And I'd be quite satisfied as a partway thing is that, each month in part of the staff report, they would say, hey, we've got this coming up for RPP proposals. Everybody has a chance to come to the meeting or make a statement about it, but super streamline it. Everything's handled at any time of the year by staff, possibly with a slight oversight step by MAP to make the final recommendation to council.
Well,
That's what I'm more or
Cory,
less
you know what?
proposing. And
We're not to task staff. We're not in the position that we tell and task the staff of the city.
Understand that our
manager
role is to advise
what
council.
they do or what they don't do. And I would disagree. It shouldn't be an administrative approval. If this is dealing with residents and neighborhoods, and just to have an approval without a hearing, without people having a chance to weigh in, it really works well. I mean, the Waltham, with all the people and meetings that happened, it worked out to a solution. It wouldn't have happened if someone just says, this is how it's going to be, and we'll give you a little bit of notice or a little bit of chance to talk. And, you know, it's not adding to staff. We don't need to add to staff what they need to do. If they want to take it over, then that's a whole nother thing. But I think Kevin and Roy are asking for our help, not for.
That's the point that I'll get with you just in a minute, Carl. That's the point. They brought that to us because they're just overloaded. That's what I heard from both Kevin and Roy. And if we can act in a maybe a slightly different role in terms of, we're familiar with RPPs, those of us that have been around for a while, and can provide some insight into how we can modify the RPP administrative stuff, if you will, as a recommendation. And we're going to be continuing to work with staff on this whole thing, but they've asked us for some help. And so in that mode, it's a little bit different, Corey, than just, you know, okay, there's a staff function and they ought to go do it. Well, let's turn it around. They've asked us to help them out. And maybe we can, maybe we can't, but I think we can.
Wait. I mean, I want.
Okay, did I misunderstand?
Carl's got his hand up. I'll let him go, but I really don't agree with the logic of what you just said, Mr. Chair, with all due respect. I'll yield the floor to Carl.
So, Corey, can you please clarify, because I'm confused now. So I thought I heard Corey say he was proposing that we update the policy to remove the steps and make that an administrative decision. So making staff's job easier, which is very different than staff having come to us and asking us to review the RPP policy. And so I think what Corey said is different from what Bill and Joy were saying. Is that correct, Corey? Did I interpret that correctly?
Yeah, my intention is to streamline this process for everyone, make it easier for staff, because, you know, parking's a problem and RPP is a solution. We've got a process where you can apply for it. I think it would have to be very unusual circumstances for us to not use the leading choice that we have for solving the issues that this process is designed to solve. And, you know, we say, here's the process. You apply, staff makes a recommendation to MAP. MAP has a chance, and the people involved have a chance if they want to come and speak to MAP. And ultimately, if there's any controversy, the decision is made by council based on recommendation from MAP and staff. But normally, this kind of trivial thing, which is implementation of the world's leading solution for the problem, that should be done by staff, and that should not be a part of our visionary work as the MAP, as I understand it.
I think, Kevin, you want to clarify it all if it's needed?
It definitely is. We have the process. It's a diplomatic process. So an applicant will come down to the parking office, inquire to me how the process works. If I'm available right then and there, I'm more than happy anytime to speak with somebody. On occasion, I have to schedule a meeting. And I'll go back to Waltham, because that, as Joy said, was almost a 2-year process. We did the vote, and there were some questions about the vote. So there was another vote. Per the guidelines, we have to have, I cannot recall, and Joy, you might be able to clarify or correct if it's 50% plus 1 or 51%.
The policy manual says 51%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Kevin. Corey covered it, 51%. Thanks.
To where we have to have that agreement. And there was some question about the vote. And one of the questions that came out of that vote was, do we want short-term renters? So somebody that might be here for a year, might be here for 2, to have a voice in this, or should this only include property owners and property managers if it's a multifamily unit, because they're here for the long haul? So these are kind of the things that we're looking for a streamlined process. And I'm not talking bad about Waltham at all. I think the program up there is working out great, but it has definitely opened our eyes to better ways to do this and look at it.
Okay, to the basic question then, to what extent, Kevin, do you feel that we can help you in developing a document, guidelines, or whatever you want to call it, to assist in this effort? And how do you view this happening? I think it's staff. You came to us and said, hey, we need some help. So let's define what help really means.
Yep, and that's exactly right, Bill. This is an item that Roy and I have been trying to tackle now for literally 2 years. The department moved in-house July of 2020, then we had the pandemic. We've just been so backed up and swamped with all the other parking changes that we haven't had a chance to, exactly what I was saying, we need to simplify some language, make it so everybody can understand it. And then these issues that were brought up by existing RPPs with guest permit abuse, and how do we deal with some of the other issues that were brought up, that we would really like the board to try to help us along those guidelines that were brought up and that staff has presented. And then anything else that the board sees would be open for discussion to clarify this as well.
Okay, I think that's pretty clear. Joy, do you have some comments on that?
I think it's clear what we're doing. It's what I had understood we're doing. We're not policymakers. We don't write code. We
Right.
clarify. And then if we have some ideas like the guest pass for 72 hours, we list those and say, this is something we might think about or do with the guest pass abuse. But, that's what I thought we were doing. I didn't think that we were, our part was to clarify, make ease of use, do better word choice, word improvement. And then if there's other changes like Kevin saw in the guest things, then those are things that could be recommendations to our city council. I didn't see us rewriting or changing the content or giving it to staff and taking it away from the map board. So that's how I understood it, because I think what Roy and Kevin are saying is that, when you get into reading a document, it seems really simple at first, but then when you get into it, it's not simple. But you have to take it from the viewpoint of, here is a resident and a group of them, and they want this, and they go to the place and they want to see it simplified. Oh, we can do this. We just have to do this and this. We see Kevin, we do this. And then it moves forward. I think Waltham for 2 years had a whole lot of issues that were outside of what we even thought were going to happen. And other ones are very smooth. They go in, they go to Kevin, it's done. But I think the language, the first step is to improve the language and the clarity, and then to start looking at, are there some specific changes that could help? And would city council hear the recommendation through Roy and through Kevin? That's how I thought we were doing it, Bill. But
Yeah, well, I agree with what you're saying. Corey, does that answer your question? Corey?
Well, yeah, I guess this is what I'm saying. I think that the scope of what we're doing does, by definition, otherwise it's not interesting or important work for us to do, is to add our recommendations about what we think. And I'm going to say, like, just as a very basic note, under, if you read the document that's on the city's website, under section 3, purpose and intent, B, the intent of the RPP is to, and you go down to number 7, it says, the intent of the RPP is to not address the lack of off-street minimum accessible parking requirements established by the Americans with Disabilities Acts or similar legislation. I think that statement does not belong, or is not worded properly. It's fundamentally incorrect and probably illegal and immoral, and not what Manitou is about, for us to say that the purpose of this is to not address federal ADA laws.
well,
My opinion is, we need, Joy, could I finish, please? Would it be okay if I finish, Joy?
Corey, but you're
Could you wait until I'm finished speaking?
Oh, sure, Corey. Anytime,
me?
I'll always wait for you.
Okay. So I believe that what we need to do as a board is, well, first of all, as a task force, we need to facilitate a process so that properly the board understands the RPP and the identified problems and has a chance to bring up other problems with it. I think we also the scope of how much public input we want on the RPP. And I recognize that just like open-ended questions. So we'd have to be very thoughtful about that. But if we're going to undertake a task force with the purpose of revising this document, we need to look at the intent and the purpose of the document and make sure that it's updated and serves Manitou today. So I'm asking for confirmation from staff or from the board or clarification on that. But that's how I'm seeing this task force.
Okay. I don't want to repeat myself, but we've been asked for help. Okay, help staff facilitate a process. And Carl, go ahead. Carl.
So I believe I'm fundamentally hearing the same thing from Joy and Corey. It sounds like this document needs to be cleaned up. It's hard to read. It's confusing. And so the first step is just to clean the document up. And then at that point, the subcommittee can start and the board can weigh in. But are there recommendations we want to make to city council for improvements? And we bring those forward and we look at them equally and just, maybe Corey's suggestion is good, or, and so the board can weigh in and say, yes, that's great, or no, and, get staff's input, and then we move forward. I don't think there's.
Yeah, let's give this process a chance to live. Okay. And I agree with you, Carl. And I think that if we approach it in a calm, collected, and generally trying to improve the document approach, we will have done a yeoman's job at cleaning up a document that really needs to be cleaned up. So I think that's why Roy and Kevin came to us and said, we need some help. And Kevin, do you want to say anything at this point, or we've said it all, I think?
I think you guys have covered it well. I've kind of laid out the things that I've seen, the things that were brought to my attention by current RPP participants, and several people that have read the document or stumbled across the document have called and asked some pretty compelling questions about the wording, where even I've had to go back in and read it. And like I've said, Roy and I have kind of scratched our heads on this, and Roy hasn't been into the parking as much as I have, but he's caught up to me in studying, and even both of us are like, that's open for some interpretation, and we should probably clean that up.
Okay, and I would assume that Kevin, both you and Roy will be involved in this process to the extent that you're able to, but I think the task force is going to need some hands-on reviews at the appropriate times to stay on track and move forward. And if we get sidetracked, we want to know that too. So is that acceptable to Corey and Joy? Are you buying into that?
Bill, it's like an onion, really, when you think of it. We're just peeling off the outside and the outside layers, and then we'll start moving inward as we get the outside part taken care of. And I feel like we're at the outside part time, because that needs to be cleaned up so we know what we have. And then you can start looking more into the heart of the matter of what needs to be done.
Right.
To me, that's what our task was. But it's getting more complicated by the minute.
Okay, well, let's end the discussion on that particular item at this point, and let's move to the second item, which is
Mr. Chair, could I comment, please?
Sorry. Yes. Sir.
So the question that has come up is, and I would like clarity, and I don't know if Kevin's able to answer this, but as a task force, are we allowed to discuss these things on email in groups of 2? I think the answer is yes, two board members maximum by sunshine laws. And
Right.
are we allowed to share ideas and brainstorming on a shared document, something like a Google Drive? And Kevin, do you happen to know the legal answer to those, or how the Sunshine, can you give us directions on the mechanics of exactly how we should be collaborating as a task force?
Yes, so I did chat with Roy, Denise, and our city clerk on that. Everything is good. Staff, you can have unlimited staff on that email chain as long as it's only 2 appointed or elected officials. And then the document is okay to go back and forth because it will be presented at future meetings as a working document that we're working off of. So from what I was told, we are good with that.
Okay, so I am going to make that Google Drive document available to everyone on the map. And if people want to get to jump in with any kind of suggestions, I think it's good. I'm fine to move on from this, but I want to raise this issue and make sure it's understood. Joy used the analogy of an onion. I am proposing that we agree. I think we could do it tonight on whether we agree that we want to streamline the process to make it much easier to handle administratively, and that would save us pages and pages of editing documents that we might later throw out. And I'm even if it were a straw poll, I'd like to get some indication from the team. And we can continue to brainstorm and collect information in an unlimited way, but I'm not in favor of doing a bunch of work on a document that might become obsolete.
Well, Corey, I, of course, am going to disagree with you and say that that's what I was tasked with. And I'm not seeing it as work that can't be done. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know, but I
Let's
think
give-
if you are going to have a Google Doc and then you send it out to the committee and then they start answering, they can only answer. I think that gets into the sunshine law. It's tricky if you're asking for the members.
Well, I asked for legal advice, and we're told that that's a method that we can use to collaborate.
I'm not sure
on the
what
task
that is.
on the task force. So that can be sent between
It's just the
staff,
2 of you.
Corey, and Joy. And then we
Yeah.
can bring that document to the next meeting where it becomes public information.
Right.
That's what it said. And I'm
Thank
not
you.
sure, I'm not using Google Doc, I'm using something else, so we'll have to talk about what we use.
Well,
but-
whatever you 2 decide to use is fine. Okay, let's move on to the next topic, which is the whole question of mobility on El Paso. And Kevin, do you want to talk about that?
Yes. So Roy wanted me to point out, where did I write that down? Because I want to get it exactly right. Okay. So Carl, this one's for you. And he assured me that you are probably already on top of this, but wanted me to make sure how important it is to incorporate the Creek Walk Trail into the El Paso Boulevard mobility.
So I struggle with that actually, because they do go the same direction, east-west, but they're separate corridors. And I know that the Creek Walk Trail does, I've seen like their master plan, their virtual site, and it talks about like trying to direct bicycle traffic along El Paso and not along the Creek Walk Trail. But, it's, to me, they're different, their corridor is heading the same direction. You're going to want pedestrians, multimodal use on both of them. The trail is probably going to be more the 8 to 80, and El Paso Boulevard, as it stands today, is not 8 to 80 compliant, from a conflict perspective. I mean, ideally, maybe we could get there, and then there would be 2 alternative paths for multimodal use. But to me, that seems, we can consider it. I'm not saying no, but that seems out of scope to me somewhat. But anyways,
Well,
maybe you can clarify.
Well, to me, there's a fundamental difference between the 2. You don't have automobiles on the Creek Walk Trail, period. You do on El Paso.
Sure,
And-
and if, I'm happy to, if the scope and direction from staff is, hey, focus on the Creek Walk Trail and how to make that better.
Well,
East-west
it's-
connectivity and multimodal, that's fine, but that's, to me, kind of a different topic
Right.
than El Paso Boulevard, but maybe I'm
Well,
complicated.
I came away reading this, Kevin, from you, that we're talking primarily about El Paso.
Right, and Roy wanted me to make sure that we're looking at ways to incorporate, whether it's some connections between El Paso and the Creek Walk Trail.
Okay, all right.
People
Okay.
go back and forth, but
That's
to
right.
incorporate
Yeah.
the Creek Walk Trail
Yeah.
into the El Paso, since they do go the same direction.
Thank you for that clarification. Now that makes sense. Thank you.
That does. And on the Creek Walk trail, there's shall I say, the larger community at large has posed the question of, gee, why aren't we connecting to the west end of Manitou Springs with the Creek Walk Trail? Now, there's challenges galore with doing that, as we all know, and we've been working on it for, God, 20, 30 years probably. And but I think that said, that the focus is on El Paso, but we've got to push the Creek Walk Trail as much as we can to the west. And yeah, Carl.
Well, so 2 comments. I mean, so going back to the connectivity, I mean, I know that there's already multiple kind of social trails, desire lines that I've actually brought up with Dole and the city, and they're looking at potentially trying to incorporate that into the Creek Walk work that they're doing, the phase 3. And so, you know, like I said, that makes sense to me. You know, connecting the west end of Manitou, you know, here again, we started with El Paso Boulevard, which ends at Manitou Avenue. That's changing the scope to now be, you know, El Paso Boulevard and Cannon and Lovers Lane and everything else. And so, and that's the desire, you know, I'm sure Luke would agree, hey, we'd be happy to look at that, but it's just, originally it was El Paso Boulevard, and so we're being focused within that corridor.
Yeah. Luke, do you want to weigh in on this discussion?
Yeah, my first reaction to safe mobility for everybody, pedestrians and bicycles, is, and this is the first thing that when Carl and I met, was one of my first reactions was, let's increase the connectivity to the Creek Walk Trail, right? So I come from, like, born and raised here in Manitou, but also in Durango, they have a 9-mile river trail that spans the entirety of the town. And the way they have clean, safe commute is to enhance features on their river trail and take bicycles off of roads with vehicles. That makes it extremely safe. If we were to, let's say, cut off all vehicle access to El Paso Boulevard, right, that would instantly make it extremely safe for bicycles. So if we have something like a Creek Walk Trail that doesn't have any vehicles on it, and if we enhance what that accessibility is for bicycles, it improves the safety 4-fold, 10-fold, a million times. But that being said, that's not the scope of what we want to do. We want to enhance the safety on El Paso Boulevard for bicycles and pedestrians. I'm all about wanting to take that traffic off of the street and enhance the ability of the Creek Walk Trail. There's an entire, I don't know the scope of the Creek Walk Committee or where that stands and who runs it. I'm not on that committee, right? I'm on the Mobility and Parking Board, and we are tasked with the safe transportation and specifically this subcommittee of El Paso Boulevard. I would love to see the Creek Walk Trail enhanced. I'd be the first one. I roller skate. I want to see it paved, right? I want to have that 10-fold better. But right now, that I don't believe that that's in the scope. If we want to take that safe corridor and expand it to the west, Carl said that I'd be first to say, let's go for it. Great. Right now, that's not the scope. I want to see Lovers Lane right behind the shops there. I want to see that improve for bicycles too, but that's not the scope right now. So right now, as I understand it, Carl and I are taking a look at how we can enhance just the corridor that we're looking at, and that does not include the river trail. I mean, we want to have safe connectivity, right? Of course we do. And so we'll look at intersections of where those meet, like let's say behind the Chamber of Commerce. How do we get from the river trail up to El Paso Boulevard? We want to improve things around Hiawatha, of course, right? Like that makes sense. Hiawatha is going to be a mobility hub. We want to incorporate all of that. But right now, when Carl and I approach things, it'll really be focused on how to improve the safety along the boulevard itself.
Kevin, you want to comment, weigh in? Thoughts?
I think Carl and Luke both hit that nail right on the head.
Okay.
Boy and I were talking about that as well. We'd love to get that connectivity to the west end. We're looking at getting a bike ride over there at Soda Springs Park and expanding the e-bikes and all of the share and all that over on that side of town. Really, the only thing that I had from Roy was make sure we try to incorporate some intersections with the Creek Walk Trail.
Okay. Perfect.
So Kevin triggered something that Roy had reached out on, and it's kind of central to maybe kind of the discussion we just had. So, you know, it's probably a month or more back, the city of Colorado Springs was updating their bike map, and they'd reached out to Roy. And Roy was trying to get Manitou included in that map. And the city of Colorado Springs refused to do so because there's no official bike route. And effectively in the bike route, and it's not even that, but you know, you could maybe make the case that there's a bike route along El Paso Boulevard and it effectively ends, right? And even if you continue down Lover's Lane and Cannon and all that to the bike ride station that they're proposing to put out, here again, from kind of ages 8 to 80, would you trust your 10-year-old kid to ride? How do they get back, right? Riding down Manitou Avenue with all the parking and all that, and the traffic circles, and making a left-hand turn to get off onto the Creek Walk Trail or onto El Paso or whatever is not something that is most people would be comfortable having their 10-year-old kid do. And so that's the real challenge from the west end is that connectivity, right? To make the full circle, to actually get to your destination and be able to get back. So
it's interesting. I was in a meeting with Colorado Springs people, and I was taking some heat on exactly the point that you just mentioned, that Manitou Springs doesn't connect all the way. So that's why I brought it up. So anyway, so the task really is El Paso, and I think the Creek Walk Trail has to integrate well with El Paso. And the question of getting further west, I think at least there was a city committee, and I may be wrong, that was tackling the Creek Walk west. I mean, we talked about it for 20 years, and some things have happened, but parts of the Creek Walk are still not paved, as far as I know. And so that's a whole nother issue in a way.
We actually have our new Park and Rec director that is overseeing the remaining phases of the Creek Walk Trail. I can invite him to one of our meetings and provide an update in the future if you guys would like.
What do you think? I think that's probably a good idea. If we're asked with your to provide recommendations on connecting Creek Walk with El Paso, I think we need to integrate Creek Walk into the whole discussion.
Yeah, and outside of just specifically this, I think it's in our title, mobility, in walking through town on the Creek Walk Trail. That's part of what we do. In my
Exactly
overall scope, and to hear from our new Park and Rec director on that topic would be fantastic.
Yeah, great. Okay. Any further comments?
I just want to say thank you to those task force team members for leaning in and jumping this with gusto. So thank you guys.
Thank you. Okay. Staff reports. Kevin, what do you got?
All right.
Other than revenues are way up.
Revenues are up, transactions are up, people are up, we're all up. Just a couple quick highlights here. The residential parking credit program, we launched that in mid-May, and at the end of June, we had a total of 424 license plates that have been added to that program. That program has definitely taken off. That number today, I think we received an additional 8 or 10 applications that were being processed through for that. It's very popular.
How does one apply for that?
What was that, Bill?
How do you apply for it? Just come
You're
down and
supposed
talk
to
to
know,
you?
Bill.
I know I'm
Come-
supposed to know. I'm asking you a question for everybody.
You come on down.
I
you
want
can-
it in the record. I want it in the record.
Well, there's several ways. You can go to the city's website, click on permits and forms, fill out the application. It'll come directly to our office. We'll process you through. The system does update overnight, so it's available for use the following day. Or you can come on down to the city hall and see some of the smiling faces in the parking office, and we'll be glad to give you a hand in person.
Thank you.
And
This,
then
this is bulletin fodder, you see.
Yep.
Okay,
in June, our most common on-street purchase for the zone 1 parking was the 2-hour parking transactions, and that came in a little over 13,000 transactions. In the OS2, the cheaper area, more people were opting for the 3-hour at 2,200 transactions. The reservation system in Hiawatha that we're piloting, that's really gained a lot of traction. We're getting a lot of phone calls on how to make a reservation in advance. So we're really getting that information out, and we're seeing it get picked up, and a lot of people are liking that option.
That's great.
How
Even
many
collect
spaces
people.
are
That's
there?
great.
Kevin, how many spaces? Because it seems if it's taking off, how many spaces do we have for that as opposed to employee parking and now the spa parking?
All right, so we're piloting 10 reservation system parking spaces right now. We had 31 employee spots in the Hiawatha lot. Those were not really being used.
Yeah, I
We
noticed.
dedicated 10 of those spaces back to the spa, and we dropped down the employee parking to 5 to open up some more availability for paid parking in the Hiawatha lot.
Does spa pay rent for those?
Yes, they do.
Okay, thanks. So they have
Um,
10, reservation 10, and then the rest 5 are for the employees?
Yes. And we're not, I think my personal opinion, because we solidified the downtown employee parking permit in May, most of the businesses had already purchased lot permits for the year. So they're utilizing those because those were $240. I think next year we're going to see the downtown employee permit pick up because it is a cheaper permit, and the business can get it, the employee can get it, and they're interchangeable with cars being hang tags. We did sign a lease with the owner of the old 7-Eleven property. We had that striped today for 22 spaces. We're going to move some downtown employee parking into that area. Where's my notes? I'm just going to kind of go over all the reports. I've got Roy's report and a public works report as well.
Hey, Kevin, just so I understand the context. So you're finding new places and it's being used for employee parking for businesses. And the businesses are reserving and paying for those, and the city is helping facilitate that. So that the businesses pay something, is that right?
Right. A downtown employee permit's $100 for the year.
Yeah.
And that allows you to park in the Hiawatha lot, 500, 400 blocks of Manitou Avenue. And now the 7-Eleven parking that was just striped today. We're going to look at opening up the Prospect lot. A lot of businesses have already purchased permits for that. I need to get that lot restriped as well. So I'll get our striping contractor out there to give me a quote. And then kind of moving into some of the other reports, Roy's and Jeff's report. So the public works report, there's repaving going on right now on Duncan and Mesa. Roy had ordered some 15-mile-an-hour speed limit signs to put up throughout some neighborhoods where we're having some speeding issues. There was a community meeting, neighborhood meeting on Pilot Knob, and Roy said that was very, very successful, and they're looking to expand that into other neighborhoods in Manitou. We did get those rear diagonal parking bumpers installed in the 500 block. That has definitely helped with people not blocking the sidewalk. I believe the closest point is 10 or 12 inches from the curb. And being at that 60-degree angle, it's really keeping those bumpers and larger truck tailgates and beds from hanging over the sidewalk. We added additional rear diagonal parking signs. So instead of facing forward out onto the road, there's now one facing both directions. So you can see them going east or westbound. We've started removing some of the yellow delineators down that 500 block. Every other one's been removed. It looks a lot better down there. And we are looking to order some kind of sign to notify large vehicles not to use that rear end parking. When myself, Roy, and Jeff were out there late last week looking at it, there was a king cab extended bed Ford pickup in one of them, and
It was
it's
white.
either walk the sidewalk or hang out into the road. I mean, the biggest truck without a CDL you could buy was in that parking spot.
I saw it, Kevin.
So, yeah, we've
think-
all been super busy.
I think kudos go to Carl for pointing out the issue with the rear end of the large vehicles protruding into the sidewalk. Thank you, Carl.
Thanks for staff
Go ahead.
for responding.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kevin.
That's pretty much everything I was given to cover. More to come.
Okay.
Still plenty of summer left, and we're moving along every day.
Yeah, Luke.
I've got just a quick question. With those rear diagonal parking and the cones, the yellow things in the middle, do we find that it's forcing traffic to then turn and go into town? So I was thinking through, right there at the old train, right? If they just spent a bunch of time in Manitou, do you think a lot of folks are leaving that parking space and then hanging a right there onto, right at the train and before City Hall? Or do you think we're forcing people into town as they try to get out? Because ideally, they would just kind of hang a left and head out of town. But really, I'm thinking through, if we were to extend this from Chase to the Chamber, are we going to force people to essentially go into town? It's just a thought, and what we've seen so far with this little pilot program.
Well, and I gotta say, Luke, I love where your head is. I really do. That was brought up by Leslie. I kind of had that same concern. We have a 2 Highway 24 sign that we want to get put on that utility pole by the train. But I'm afraid if we add that weight, it might fall over all the way. So we're waiting for CSU to replace or repair that pole. But I do have that sign in my office to get put up.
Cool.
Talking with Roy, we're gonna probably do 1 or 2 more to try to get maybe some more traffic to use Old Man's Trail and go around the other side of the park back up Sunshine Trail to 24 that way as well.
Gotcha.
Carl.
So I have 2 questions. One, just, so is that going to potentially direct more traffic on like El Paso and back to Hiawatha? And there's been some discussion of maybe making Old Man's Trail one way, and just, are we backing ourselves into a corner here?
Well, that's a good point, Carl. I do recall that discussion of potentially Old Man's Trail. As far as El Paso, it would only be that short little distance from Manitou Avenue back to Washington or Sunshine Trail. To the highway. I mean, I definitely understand where you're coming from, and that's something that may have been overlooked that we'll definitely look at the staff level.
And especially in the context of Luke and I's subcommittee, right? Where, hey, we're trying to make this a mobility corridor, and hey, you got great mobility until you get to Hiawatha Garden, and then, you're SOL kind of thing, right?
What about a roundabout? I know we've talked about stoplights at the train and at Chase, but what about a roundabout? Turn them and burn them.
So I've actually asked that question of Dole, and I don't mean to answer for staff, but I mean, what Dole mentioned to me was that they have looked at a roundabout. It would actually they'd have to take some property from kind of like the laundromat or whatever, it would impede, right? Because you need a broader easement, if you will, for that to fit. But they have looked at it. And he did also mention that, you know, this is the United States where people don't know how to drive roundabouts. When you have predominant traffic one direction, it can make it really hard if you're trying to go the other direction because people don't yield. But
They're getting better.
I just want to say that as someone who works across the street, it's possible that people like myself make an illegal U-turn every day.
There you go. Okay, Carl.
so if I can change the topic,
Sure.
back to the revenue report. It's being a data guy, right? It's curious to me that the on-street and citation revenues are up 40 to well beyond 40%, but the lot revenues are up much smaller, you know, marginal, maybe single digit percentages. I mean, because initially, like you look at that and you go, oh, hey, it's, you know, the progressive parking or, you know, more people coming to town, but you'd think it would be more evenly distributed across the lots and the on-street, or maybe it's because the lots don't have progressive parking rates and the on-street does. I mean, curious to get Kevin's insights.
All right, so here we go, because I had a feeling that question was going to be asked. Canyon lot is actually included in our on-street one category. We just break it out so we can kind of keep track of that lot. So a lot of that follows everything that is on Manitou Avenue from Memorial Park down to Park Avenue and Canyon. The metro lots, Fishne and Wichita, chose not to do the progressive rates. They are offering a $2 an hour or a $10 all day option in their lots. So that's why their revenues are lower. What we're seeing is Hiawatha is part of our OS2 as well, but we break that out for finance and just to show all the different lots. So that one's a little cheaper rate, and that's why people are using that one longer. More COG users, incliners are going to that lot. That's why we're seeing that average transaction, the 3 hour, not the 2 hour in the more expensive core downtown. And the citation revenue is up because we have a fantastic citation collection now where we're able to take some action on the outstanding debt that we have. So what we're seeing is a lot of the outstanding debt starting to come back into the city on an active collection.
Okay,
Thank you.
city council report, Natalie. Are you still with us?
Yeah, I don't have a prepared report. Let's see, I'm trying to think. I'm sorry I missed the last few meetings. Hopefully I'm back in line with things.
It's good to smiling face at this meeting.
Yeah, I made
Go ahead.
it.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. But I do think, you know, there are some, it's interesting because I have noticed that we do talk about mobility and transportation sometimes in our meetings. We talk about empowering our advisory boards, and then we somehow then negate that later on in meetings. And so I think it's going to be interesting moving forward, figuring out the best way to use all of you to the best of everyone's ability. So I just wanted to, it's complicated. You know, sometimes our conversations around mobility end up in executive sessions. I don't know how to fix that, but just, you know, I mean, I'm actively working on that piece and trying to figure out the best way to make this work. So.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Mhm.
Any questions from the board to Natalie?
I just wanted to say thank you very much, Natalie. And, you know, we're here to serve the council and to try to be your advisors and to add value to you. And so if you see ways that we can add more value, please always let us know. And we're just glad that you're able to join us when you can. Thank you.
I will say that when we were talking about RPPs and things like that, it'd be great if we got to a point where RPPs were just on the consent calendar and that council was just recognizing everything was checked off and that we just said, you know, we trust that you've done your due diligence, or that staff, and we can move on. So, so as much as, yeah, we are involved, I think the goal is to have us just be, you know, approving it quickly and efficiently in our meetings. So.
Sounds good. That's a charge. We got to live up to it now.
Well, and
Okay.
my other council members may not make that happen, but I think it's a good plan.
It's a goal. It's a goal. So, okay. We don't have any old business, board correspondence. Anybody want to say anything about anything related to transportation and parking?
Yeah, I will, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind.
Corey, anytime.
You know, we talked the last couple of months about the Hiawatha Gardens agreement with the city, and there was a little bit of a runaround, and I wanted to let the board know that I have received that agreement. And Kevin, I'm not sure if it got out to the whole rest of the board, but there was interest from the rest of the board. So can we make sure that all of the MAP board did get that document that we had asked for a month or so ago? That was the agreement that was relative
Higginbotham,
to.
you mean?
So I'm sorry, Higginbotham Flats.
Okay.
Excuse me. And the other thing that we had brought up at that meeting that I don't know that we really got an answer from was, you know, what is the legal status of the right of way from Higginbotham down to town? And, you know, is that a potential option for some kind of a multimodal trail access? You know, not we weren't making a proposal to open it as a road, but can we improve it and make it better as a multimodal trail? And I don't know where that request got to, or even how to make it really, but I'm sort of bringing it up again, and I don't know where to go with that. Thank you.
Well, that trail, if you want to call it that, is sort of a minefield, if you will. And it's got
Yeah.
some very sharp turns in it.
Yeah.
And I haven't biked it myself. I walk it once in a while, but yeah, I think as a trail, it might fly.
Well, the neighborhood might have something to say.
The neighborhood definitely will have something to say.
Yeah.
I can assure you of that. That's a very active neighborhood, and they really keep their eyes on everything. I used to live up there, so
Yeah, so you know.
I know. Corey, I guess the answer is, hey, let's see, has a document has been sent out? Is that what I understand? Because I haven't seen it.
The document that I received was the agreement between Higginbotham Flats and the city, and it explains, you know, as best it can, it explains how decisions would be made about the property, considering that there are two owners. And then the secondary question, and so that's one document that's available. And if Kevin doesn't have it, I'll get it to Kevin, and we'll make sure that everyone on the board gets it, because it was mentioned at a board meeting. And then the secondary question was what I believe is a platted street from Higginbotham into that neighborhood. And is you know, the question of what's the legal status of that, and is it available for some kind of a trail or path? And yeah, totally understand that there'll be community input and discussion on that, but just we'd like to know what options are, and we are constantly looking for ways to improve mobility. So you know, is there any kind of opportunity there? Thanks.
It is a platted street, and it's been only open for when there's a contractor doing some major work that needs that access to that road, if you will, up, back and forth. And well, the last time that happened was 2 or 3 years ago, I think. So the rest of the time it's just flat out closed because of the hazardous conditions, so to speak. Here's washouts and spots. It's not a pretty road, I can tell you that, and it's steep in spots as well. Yeah, well, you know that, so you've probably ridden it, haven't you?
I'm not sure that I have. I think I've hiked it, and would agree.
Yeah.
But you know, there's always opportunities to improve a trail, and if it would improve.
No, I totally understand. I think it's a legitimate question, and we need to understand more about it and where the city really stands on that. That's a really a public works issue. And Kevin, if you can talk to Jeff about that, that would be good. And just see what the status of that is. There's a Roger Trewick is building a house up there right adjacent to it. I don't know how that's going to affect things, but I know that's going on. Yes, Carl.
I mean, I've heard discussion of, a potential park being put up at Higginbotham Flats, and this is, a perfect opportunity for connectivity for, non-motorized use to get people, access to that asset, that part of town without having to get in their car.
Yeah, no, good point. Good point. It's a heck of a lot, even though it's steep and rocky and everything else, it's a heck of a lot better than Serpentine. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So from a safety standpoint, so.
So
Okay,
is that something, so Bill, you're asking Kevin if he can do that, and I just want to make sure we're not out of line in requesting Kevin to speak to Jeff. Is
I
that
think
what?
that's, I think this is totally in line. It's adding potentially to the mobility of the community. And I think it's a legitimate question to ask. As Joy pointed out, there's probably going to be a fair amount of neighborhood resistance, but anytime change is tough. So there we are.
I'll make sure not to let Jeff know you told me not to talk to him. I mean, I try to avoid that too. No, I'm just playing. I'll get with Jeff for it.
Thank you. Thanks, Kevin.
And the documents that Corey sent you, can you distribute those as well?
I'll get those out. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Who else has something they want to say? Oh gosh, we got a quiet crowd tonight. Come on, guys and gals. Well, if nobody has anything else to say, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Bill, I move that we adjourn the July 27th MAP board meeting.
Second.
We moved in second, and all in favor, please say aye. We're adjourned. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Later.